Right. Well, welcome everyone to a special board meeting that was scheduled for today. We're going to begin with a call to order. Do I have a motion to start the Gordon Burnell Governance Council special meeting on April 30th, 2025 at 1 p.m.?
I'll move that we open the Gordon Burnell Governance Council special meeting.
Thank you, Michelle. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Deb. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. We have called this special meeting to order. We're going to do a really quick roll call so that anyone viewing the recording as well as the notes knows who's in attendance. My name is Martha Hughes, and I am the Gordon Burnell Governance Council Board President. And I'll pass it off to Beth.
My name is Beth Doretto. I'm the Director of Gordon Burnell Charter School. And I'll pass it off to Tina.
My name is Tina Martinez. I'm a Gordon Burnell board member. To Deb.
Hi, I'm Deb DeTore. I'm a Gordon Burnell Governance Council member. Oh, and I pass it to Michelle.
Hi, I am Michelle Staley. I am a Gordon Burnell Governance Council member, and I will pass it off to, hold on, not everybody is showing on my screen. I didn't put my view correct. If somebody wants to call out, oh, here we go. Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris Kazan. I'm the administrator at MDC.
And that leaves Erica.
Hi, this is Erica, and I will be taking notes for Governance Council meeting today.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you all.
Martha and I included on the agenda the approval of our minutes from the last meeting, but those didn't get sent out. So Martha, you may want to table that for the next general meeting for that action item number 2, or that second step. Sorry, words.
That's right. Thank you, Beth. Yeah, so before we get started, the first thing then is to approve this current agenda for the special meeting. Do I have a motion to approve this agenda?
I move to approve today's agenda.
Thank you, Tina. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Michelle. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And so, yes, as Beth mentioned, we did not get a copy of the minutes for our last regular meeting. That will happen for our regular meeting in May for those who are watching or reading. And so do I have a motion to table approval of minutes?
I move to table the approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Tina. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Deb. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. We have tabled the approval of minutes until our next meeting on the third Thursday in May. It looks like we do not have any public community members for public comment. So we are going to then skip over. We don't have any past business at the moment. So the special meeting is primarily for our current business of addressing the Department of Education Title VI compliance certification. So I'll pass it off to you, Beth.
Thank you. I'm going to drop into the chat I had it already. Hold on here. Just in case anybody wants to look at some of the documents that we're speaking of, these have been, there's nothing new in that folder, but there are all of the documents that have been previously sent out. And so just to kind of recap some of the historical documents that the board is considering, we did receive a email from the Secretary of Education in which she was forwarding a request from the Department of Ed we had previously understood that the state was being asked to certify their compliance with Title VI. And there was a message to LEAs, which are districts and charter schools, that the federal, here comes Jody, the federal Department of Education was requesting a certification from each LEA. And so that email is included, has been sent out to you and is included in the folder that I've just linked in the chat, as well as the state of New Mexico's response. Then we also had an email from our legal counsel with some recommendations on how to interpret that and some possible suggested options for moving forward. We then also got a template from the lawyer if we did choose to respond. Pretty shortly after that, we received another email from our legal counsel in which she shared that there were injunctions approved against the United States Department of Education and this request, not in New Mexico, but in other states. And she thought that that was timely. And then she also attached one of those granted injunctures for review. And so that's also in this folder. And then finally, we got an email from Joseph Escobedo, who is the APS representative for charter schools, in which he expressed a confirmation that APS considered charter schools as part of their LEA and suggested that no response is the best response. What we have heard from the state of New Mexico, from our lawyer, and from Joseph at APS is that it is our decision, the board's decision on how we want to respond. But there is a theme of not necessarily a need to at this point, feeling like we're covered by APS's response, covered by the state's response, and covered by these injunctions in other states. That being said, some charter school boards are choosing to respond, and some of them have used the template provided by their lawyer, and some of them are writing their own responses. And so that's kind of the question at hand, is how the board wants to proceed to the request. I'll just note real quick that we have missed the deadline set by the federal government, but we were only received notice that we were supposed to meet that deadline like 48 hours before the deadline actually happened. So, but just noting for the minutes and for the board's consideration that that deadline has passed. And so happy to answer any other questions or pull up any of those documents on a shared screen if that would be helpful.
Thank you, Beth, for sharing all of those documents and that background information and perspective. I think one of the things the board discussed at our last meeting is that we would like to hear from APS on their interpretation of, what counts as an LEA and whether charter schools are already included under, their response, or whether we'd have to come up with our own response. And so that gives us the definitive answer from APS that yes, we are included under their LEA umbrella. And it sounds like the preference there from their charter school director is, that we do not need to make our own response to the certification. Other questions, comments from the board?
I have a question. If we are covered under APS's charter and their response encapsulates Gordon Bernal as well, what was their response?
That's an excellent question, Tina, and I don't know. And what we got from Joseph was very short and said, charter leaders, many of you he didn't respond to me directly, although I did reach out. He sent an email to all charter leaders, which they currently authorize 30 charters in the Albuquerque area. And so his answer just was, many of you have asked if Albuquerque Public Schools serves as your local education agency, and the answer is yes. Your school is covered regarding the memo below, as APS is your LEA, and your school is also covered by the New Mexico Public Education Department's letter. In short, there's nothing you need to do regarding this at this time. Thank you, Dr. Joseph Escobedo. That being said, all he attached was the state's response.
So, oh, Tina, did you have a follow-up?
No, I saw all of those things as well. And
Yeah.
so I didn't want to assume, but I guess, am I assuming that APS is leaning on the state's response and saying that is APS's response as well, which means that would be ours?
I went back to the original email because there's 2 attachments that you can't click on, right? And just to make sure, one of the attachments that Joseph sent was the state of New Mexico's response, which we had already received directly from the state. And the other was just the request, that blank, do you want to certify? And so I don't know that APS is responding. I'm not privy to that information, and I could ask again for additional clarification, but I don't know.
And I have a question. I'm wondering, so you mentioned that other charter schools, I think I understood you to say, other charter schools under APS did make the decision to respond. Is that correct? Have you had a chance, or is that something that has been discussed to know why did they choose to respond?
My answer is going to be based on some assumptions that I've made, right? And so I just want to, preface my statement by that. I do attend a weekly Public Charter Schools of New Mexico collaborative call where a lot of charter leaders come together and discuss a wide range of topics. And this has been on the agenda more than once. My kind of impression from those that are choosing to respond is the board's and the school's desire to make a stance against the request, to acknowledge that to offer an alternative definition of DEI, to enforce a statement that they're continuing to value diversity, equality, and inclusion. It's a political statement. My understanding is those that have chosen to respond are either making a political statement in opposition of the request. And the flip side, there are other charters, not necessarily under APS, but throughout the state, who are choosing to make their own certifications because they don't want to make that political statement, because they want to be counted on the side of I'm compliant, I'm not resisting, so there are charter boards who are interested in making a statement against the request and really reinforcing again that idea that they want to continue their current DEI policies. And there are other charter schools who wanted to send in the generic template, yes, for compliance in case there is some magic checkbox, right? And they want to get checked off as being compliant. They don't want to put into jeopardy their federal funds that they receive. And so that's been the perceived threat, right? If you're not compliant, they can withhold funds. So some charter schools want to say, we don't need your funds, this is what we think. And some charter schools want to say, we're happy to comply with our interpretation of what civil rights means, and therefore we'll sign this, we'll send it in, and then we will possibly reduce any fallout from who doesn't respond or who responds with a political statement. So I think it's a mixed bag. It really depends on the boards and how they're feeling about the political stance that this signifies.
Well, the only other thing, and I'm going to say that this is a puzzle piece that's different in education than it is in early intervention. But I did see on the news this morning that Yazzie Martinez is basically being brought back as as something we need to look at. And part of me was like, okay, in the public school system, does that connect to DEI? And is that like, we didn't get your letter, state of New Mexico type thing? So those are pieces that I think, it's hard to make a decision on this. I think some of the things that are happening, and I think we have to be comfortable in saying, you know, I can understand why some folks are wanting to make a statement. We've got to decide what's right for us. And my final question, and then I'll hush up. Are we protected? If APS said, no, we're not responding, or we're responding this way, and you have that email that they're saying you are under us, we are somewhat protected, would you think? Or are we in the center of the target, depending? Or are there any answers?
My assumption, again, it's an assumption, right, is that, you know, if you were to just look at how we are coded as a school, for example, like when I fill out forms or I submit data, I identify as 001030, 001 being APS, identifying the district, 030 identifying Gordon Burnell as a school. So I think on any sort of paper, we are intrinsically tied to APS and will appear as a school within the APS district. I think New Mexico is pretty unique in how we've structured charter schools and the charter school movement here. And so I think an outsider, without doing a lot of research, wouldn't even understand the difference between a locally authorized charter school and any other school listed under 001, the district of APS. So I feel fairly confident that anybody at the federal level, or anybody really without an intricate knowledge of how charter schools work in New Mexico, and specifically district authorized charters, and that gets pretty deep in the weeds, to be honest. So again, I feel really confident that people looking at us on a spreadsheet will come to the conclusion that we're an APS school, just because of how we're coded and how we report, and how, you know, we report through APS to the state. A lot of our federal money that we receive flows through APS, goes to the state goes to APS, APS distributes to us. So I think in any which way that you look at it, we appear an APS school. Legally, we're not really. We have a contract that says we have a whole bunch of autonomy, but none of that, you know, our charter contract isn't going to be examined. And in terms of state reporting, we certainly look like an APS school.
I think that that's exactly how we are looked at.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, although there's a whole side of me that would love to make some political statement, I think that APS is the largest, the most diverse school district probably in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe we should just lay low and let them take care of it. That's just what I think we should do, because we don't look different. We are part of the way, you're exactly right, the way the law reads, we have a contract. But the way we look, we're still part of APS. They still administer us.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that with what Joseph said, with attachments that didn't open, and very brief, I think we should just abide by what he said. We're covered by you. We don't need to do anything at this point in time. There may come a time that we do, but I think that we've got it in writing. You know, if he just told you on the phone, that would be a different situation.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only thing that makes me a little uncomfortable about that, I agree, we are covered by the district as their authorized charter, which makes their response our response. However, without knowing what their response is, like that would be the only thing that I would think, do we need to put our flag in the ground and say, APS says this, but this is what we believe. And without knowing what APS did or said, or are they just kind of mums the word, we're going to go with the New Mexico Secretary of Education's response and say we're covered under that?
That's pretty much how I read Joseph's response.
He attached the Secretary of Education's, the state's response. So I that's again an assumption, right? And I don't really know the answer, but I interpreted at this point that APS has not made a statement. And I would hope that if and when they do, they would share that publicly and let their schools and charters know. That communication doesn't always exist, but sometimes it does. And we've not received any of that. Just you're covered by us, you're covered by the state, don't do anything. But I agree, Tina, that means we're covered by a statement. We only know what the state said. We're not privy to whether APS has or plans to respond in any sort of way. At this point, we don't know.
At this time, that's what he says.
Mhm.
How would you feel, Tina, in terms of, if APS did make a statement at some point in time and we as a board did not agree with it and wanted to take a different stance at that point in time, then we could create a document that held, a different stance.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm leaning. If we decide later when we see APS's response that it is something that goes against what we believe, then I think maybe the deadline's passed, so it doesn't matter if we do this today or tomorrow or, but and I mean, I guess we cross that bridge when we get to it. Does that need to be a political thing? Does it just need to say we go against, what this other big general statement is? My feeling with the state's response is that it kind of called out all of the things I had trouble with, right? It's vague. We are following and have followed the law. We're also tied by Yazzie Martinez. Like it lists all of those things. So I'm pretty confident in that response. My only kind of quandary is if APS says something different.
Mhm.
Thank you all for your contributions. Any other comments or questions? So for our next step, we do have an action item related to our, response here. At the moment, it sounds like we're leaning on, we're currently covered by APS in the state of New Mexico, so we're not going to make a direct certification document that we submit. However, we are still very curious of whether APS is going to make a separate statement and whether or not we would agree with that statement. And so, Beth, perhaps you could just keep us in the loop and send out any information as soon as you get it from APS. Then at that point, the board can review, and if we want to call another special session, we can do that. If there's no news in between now and the next board meeting, we can just have like a quick follow-up to say, haven't heard anything back. There's nothing else from the federal government. We're just moving forward. So that could be our potential plan, Deb.
So do we need to table that?
We could
Since it's
table
an
it.
action item, we have to do something. We either have to move to approve or not, or I think the other thing we can do is table it. So we have an option to approve it, and then we have to vote no. And I think if we're allowed to, I think we should table it until we hear from APS. Can you just move to do that? Can we?
I think that we could move to table it. I think we could also approve of Gordon Burnell's non-response as a response and just, have it in the minutes that the board is requesting that the school not respond at this time, that they feel that APS and State of New Mexico can speak on our behalf, and we reserve the right to revisit depending on something along those lines. And it's just an approval of I think no response is a response, right? And so that way I can say my board approved me not responding if I'm asked. I can say, or they were not that they tabled it, right? But that the current board's perspective is don't respond. And I don't know exactly how you word that, Martha, but that would, then if I'm asked, why didn't you do this? I'll say, because on 4:30, the board approved that I don't do anything until further information is
I think that's
or something along those lines.
Because I agree with Tina. If we don't hear, we can't really make a sound decision because we don't know what we're agreeing to let them cover us for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Michelle.
I think here's what's in my mind, and I don't know really what it's called under Roger's Rules of Order or whatever it is, because I think Tina made a good point. We don't have sufficient information to make a decision, but yet we want to, in some way, I don't want to say protect ourselves, but could we say that at this time, we make a motion that at this time we're not going to respond pending future additional information, wording it in such a way that we're recognizing that we don't know that this is our final decision. We're kind of up in the air. And then I feel in some ways that gives us another little bit of
Fine.
comfort zone or a little bit more protection that or will give us a choice to make a political statement. So I don't know under Roger's rules how that works, but I know there's a way of doing it.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, thank you all. I would suggest that I kind of summarize the statements that we've been expressing and then ask for an approval of that, statement, and then we vote on that. And so in summary, the Gordon Burnell Governance Council has decided to not submit a response to the certification of Title VI, pending the fact that we are covered under the umbrella of APS as our LEA, as well as the Public Education Department of New Mexico. And in the future, depending on responses given by APS or the state of New Mexico, we may decide to revisit this conversation and decide whether a specific response from Gordon Burnell Charter School is needed. Would there be any additions or changes to that particular statement?
Am I getting too detailed if I say we should maybe include the dates from those letters we're basing this on?
Sure. So in our notes, Erica, if you wouldn't mind, and feel free to use this recording for the exact wording, that in response to the request for certification of Title VI from an unknown source within the National Department of Education on, was it April 3rd, Beth? I don't have the dates right.
The
Mhm.
request to the state was on April 3rd. The request to the state to forward that to LEAs was April 22nd.
On April
With a
22nd.
deadline
Okay.
of April 24th. So the state received the original request to certify on April 3rd.
On April
but the
23rd, which they
request-
responded to.
which they responded to in a timely manner. The request to forward the request to LEAs didn't come until April 22nd, 2 days before the deadline.
So keeping in context that we said we know that we are under the purview of the New Mexico Department or Public Education Department, which did respond to that request on April 3rd to certify Title VI, as well as then the request of specific LEAs to certify on the deadline of April 24th or 25th. 24th, that at this moment we are choosing not to respond to that specifically with our school's response. We are covered under APS. We have also received certification from APS that they consider us under their umbrella. And so pending any change in response given by APS at this moment, we are not going to be giving a specific certification response, and that we may revisit this topic in the future.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Do I have a motion to approve our current no response to the certification request?
I move that we do not respond to the current request and to include the information that Martha just summarized.
Thank you, Deb. Do I have a second?
I'll
Oh,
second.
thank you, Jody. She's seconded
Oh,
in the
good.
chat.
Good.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we have approved the summary of our response. Thank you, Erica, for taking notes and being able to put that together in a summary for us. We know that typically this is, we would normally have, documents prepared that we speak about, but just because of the short notice of this particular request as well as the unknowns, then we had more of the ad hoc coming up with a particular response in this session. All right, so quickly then, future business reminder, we will also briefly revisit this issue in our next board meeting on May 15th at 4 p.m. If there is a response from APS in the meantime, Beth will share that with board members. Yeah, any last comments or questions, things that we need to wrap up before the meeting ends? All right. Well, thank you all very much for your time. We appreciate wanting to have folks get back to their days. Do I have a motion to conclude
Adjourn.
this special meeting of the Gordon Burnell Governance Council on April 30th, and the time will be 1:33 p.m.
I move that we adjourn the special meeting of the Gordon Burnell Governance Council meeting.
Thank you, Deb. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Tina. All in favor?
Aye.
And Jody, either in chat or voice, are you able to confirm your vote? She might have,
We got
yeah,
it.
there you go. Thank you, Jody. I
Thanks, Jody.
appreciate it. So we have moved to adjourn the Gordon Burnell Governance Council special meeting on April 30th and is now 1:34 p.m. Thank you all. Have a great
Thank you.
afternoon.
Appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye.